Hello, everyone. You're all very welcome. We'll give it a few minutes just to let everyone join. You might also let us know in the chat box or in the Q&A where in the world you're joining from. I would say good afternoon, but sure, that's only my time zone. There's a good few joining there. Just give it a minute.
Where is everyone joining from on the panel, actually? I'm calling in from London.
We've got Lucan for myself, so Dublin/Kildare.
I'm here in Offaly in Ireland.
I'm from County Dublin, Malahide in Ireland.
And just yourself, Ailbhe?
I'm in Dublin.
No.
But originally from County Meath, outside the Pale.
Outside the Pale, I like that.
Okay.
Right,
so I'll go away myself, so I'll be the Connacht representative.
That's it. Okay, well, I think with that we'll begin, and we may have people joining us as we go. So hello and welcome to Abhaile, our first ever Returning to Ireland conference. My name is Sarah Owen, and I'm project leader with Crosscare Irish Diaspora Support Project. We're a specialised service offering support to Irish citizens at all stages of their migration. Our work and this conference is made possible thanks to the support of the Government of Ireland's Emigrant Support Programme. So as many of you will know, Abhaile means home, and this simple word holds so much weight and meaning, particularly when viewed through the lens of emigration and return migration. So throughout this week, we've had a series of conversations with an excellent lineup of speakers, all exploring themes around return migration to Ireland. Thank you for joining us today for our Back in Business panel, where we'll be discussing how returning Irish emigrants can rebuild their networks in Ireland and hit the professional ground running. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions of our panel at the end of the panel discussion, so please submit your questions in the Q&A section below. And whilst we might not have time to get to all the questions, you can get in touch with us at diasporasupport.ie if you have further queries. You can follow us on social media as well to join the global conversation using hashtag Abhaile2024, and we will be sharing a recording of our discussions so you can share these with your network. I'm delighted to introduce Jack Stenson, who will be moderating the discussion today. Jack is on the board of directors of Digital Irish, named in the top 40 under 40 Irish in America. Jack has worked in London, New York, and Dublin. He's also the founder of Voice, Fast Company World Changing Idea Awards honoree, and a startup featured in the Wall Street Journal. You're very welcome, Jack.
Thank you very much. Yeah, delighted to be here today. And yeah, Digital Irish is a networking group founded in New York 2013. I set up the chapter in London 2 years ago, and the purpose of it is to shine a spotlight on Irish-led innovation abroad, and we try and be a facilitator connecting Irish startups to the UK and US corporate ecosystem to get them valuable introductions and serendipitous encounters. I set up Digital Irish here because, having lived in New York, I found that there was such a great culture for introductions, networking, and I wanted to emulate some of that in London and help bring some of that New York spirit and help foster connections in the Irish business community here. So yeah, delighted to be here today and speaking with these fantastic people and get their perspectives on building networks as well.
Thank you very much, Jack. Moving on to our speakers, I'm delighted to welcome Paula Fitzsimons, Ailbhe Mullen, and Erin Whittle. So Paula is the founder of Fitzsimons Consulting, which specializes in areas related to entrepreneurship and growth. She was the national coordinator for the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor research project in Ireland for 20 years, has served on the global board as president of the national teams for several years. So well known for her ability to spotlight particular demographic groups, Paula has designed tailored programs to support their entrepreneurial needs, and this includes Back for Business, a tailored initiative for returning immigrants who've recently established a new business or are planning to do so on their return to Ireland. The initiative is supported by the Department of Foreign Affairs, and it's currently in its 7th cycle, and you can find more about this at backforbusiness.com. Next, we have Ailbhe Mullen, Board of Directors member of the Irish International Business Network, IIBN. She's also the former Global Executive Director for their London headquarters and co-founder of the IIBN New York chapter since 2008. She has over 25 years experience working and living in New York and London, and during this time, Ailbhe worked in hospitality, real estate, and business networking industries in various roles, including operations, project management, sales, property advisor, and senior leadership Ailbhe returned to Europe in 2015, and she serves as a board member of Dublin City FM. She loves to travel and experience cultures across the world. She is a make it happen person with a can-do attitude and is always striving for excellence in everything she does. You're very welcome, Ailbhe. And then finally, last but not least, we have Erin Whittle. Erin is the Group Business Improvement Manager at FRS Network and has a background in recruitment and HR transformation project management. Erin and her family relocated from Melbourne, Australia to Offaly in Ireland in 2017. So without further ado, thank you everyone for joining, and let me hand you over to Jack and our panelists for what I know will be a very interesting discussion.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Sarah, for the great introductions there, and also for hosting this. I think it's a great program and very beneficial, having moved around so much. This would have been beneficial for me a few years ago. But so if we start with maybe Erin, you just highlighted there by Sarah that you moved from Melbourne to Ireland. You've had a personal journey of moving to Ireland, building professional networks from scratch. Can you tell us about your experience? What worked, what didn't?
Yeah, sure. So I think originally when I was looking to relocate, the first purpose of kind of my network was to help me to find employment and to get a job, basically. I didn't have much of a network myself in Ireland. I had very big kind of networks in Australia and New Zealand, but not as such sort of in Europe and the Irish market. So yeah, that was the kind of key purpose initially for me, was to find employment and find out more about the market. So before I actually relocated, I connected with, I use LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn user, and went on and did quite a bit of research, contacted some recruitment agencies in the region that I was looking to relocate to, so around the Offaly region. And really that was just to sort of find out more about what was happening in the market. Were there jobs in Offaly, in regional Ireland? Were there remote working opportunities? What sort of salaries were on offer? That type of thing. So that was like a big focus of my kind of initial establishing my network. And also just on that LinkedIn side of things, just joining different kind of groups through LinkedIn as well. So I think then once I did kind of secure my job and I had kind of moved, then there was a different reason for my networking and developing my network, and that was really just to build my contacts, build my connections, leverage those contacts, for more experience, and just to really, get more knowledge of what's happening in the market here as well. So with that, I did use like a lot of, connections that I already had, friends and families, work colleagues, and kind of really tapping into those and their own networks as well. And a really big part of it, I think, was, attending events. So, local events and events that were happening around the country that I could access. So I think for me, just going back to what you were saying there, what works and what doesn't, I think looking at LinkedIn, for example, I think just making sure that you are, purposeful with your connections and your connection requests. And I think a personalized note is like really important as well. So it looks quite genuine and it's not just a kind of, a spam or something like that. And I think then if we sort of look at events again, getting out there, just to make an effort when you go to events as well, to make, meet people, have conversations. Sometimes you have to kind of go out a little bit outside your comfort zone, but I think that works really well. And then, that kind of following up with people that you are meeting and networking with as well. So I guess on the flip side, what doesn't work is, if you are just sort of going to an event and you're not chatting to anyone or not meeting anyone, or connecting and engaging. So that would be my kind of feedback on that anyway.
Sure. Yeah. I think certainly as I've gotten older, I think being intentional in the relationships that I have, whether
Yes.
friends or professionally, is something that I've learned that is important. So I think, going to those events and, understanding, first of all, I think that if people are at these things, chances are they want to meet people. So it's
Exactly.
to go there, there's no reason to be shy or nervous about if you're going to something, a professional or networking thing. That's why people are there. So there's always a little bit of a, who will I talk to? What will I talk about? But everyone's there for the same reason. I think once you kind of put that in your mind, it makes it so much of an easier thing, especially for people who are more introverted. But then, yeah, I think certainly being authentic and personable and open and honest, I suppose, and authentic in any sort of LinkedIn request. I get a lot of those for my day job in the startup investment world, and it's very obvious when someone is just throwing in an invitation out there versus, "Hey, this is actually why I think we could have a meaningful conversation." So,
Yes.
so that's some really, really great advice there. And were there any kind of other non-digital channels? So did you find anything in the local newspapers, or was there anything like
Yeah.
that you found beneficial, as because you're not only building a network, but you're kind of building an understanding as well of
Yeah,
life.
absolutely. Yeah, it's actually funny you said that. The local newspapers were a big kind of source of information as to what was happening in the region. And yeah, I did find that, that was a good source of information for me. The local enterprise office and the local chambers I felt were also really, really useful for different networking events and events that were happening around the region. I think just as for me as well, just joining like local clubs and I think I was on a few committees fairly early on as well, but it was a great way of meeting people in the area and kind of broadening networks and getting that experience as well. And sometimes like there's things that come out of the parish newsletters from the mass as well. Like there's things happening that you wouldn't be aware of as well. So and then I guess probably lastly would just be like on Facebook, there are some really there are some community groups on Facebook as well, and that there can be some really useful information around events and things that are happening in the region as well. So they would probably be the things that the channels for me to kind of source this information.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on kind of you obviously had a lot of experience abroad, and did you find that how would you say people can leverage their international experience to enhance their professional networks in Ireland? So how would you have used that international experience to help build bridges or
yeah, I think it's really about just sort of sharing and then learning from each other as well. So I think there's a lot that you can bring, when you have sort of lived abroad, or if you've come from a different culture and different background as well. So I think it's really about sharing your experiences, and I think it really helps to broaden people's perspectives as well. They can learn from people coming from abroad as well, and learn from that international experience, and likewise, I would have learned then from people here as well, from their experiences.
Yeah, I think certainly when I lived in New York, I found that people love, especially the New Yorkers, love being have the ability to connect people and being able to introduce people and being the person who can introduce people. It's the currency there. So it's something that, and in the UK, London is very, very opposite to that. The British culture is like, oh, I won't introduce you because you might make me look bad in 3 years' time. So there's a real like chalk and cheese here. And it's one thing that I tried to bring back a bit was the value of just paying it forward. And like, I'm not looking for anything. I think that you two might have a good conversation, and it's nothing on me if someone goes nuts or maybe has a bad impression. But certainly, it's something that I learned.
It's interesting when you say that, though. I just think even like where I live locally, people don't tend to talk a lot about their kind of professional world or their careers or work. Like it's a very different environment. So I think in Australia, people do talk about work a lot, and I just found it different where I am anyway, where I'm based now. It's not a topic. So I would be constantly, where do you, or what sort of work are you in, and that type of thing. But people, they don't really talk about work at all in social settings and social environments. Well, that's what I found anyway.
Yeah, and I think certainly, there's no better compliment than wanting to work with someone, I think. And also kind of leveraging or like segueing from a personal conversation about like they're not going to talk about work. I suppose you can bring up, just like tell me more what you do. Like I want to learn more about this industry you're in, the job you're doing, which is kind of an easy way to segue from that personal stuff maybe into the professional stuff, which isn't as natural. So that's maybe.
So it is a bit, you have to put more of an effort, I think, in terms of that side of building work as well. Yeah.
And then I suppose at FRS where you're working now, how do you engage and support people who are going through the recruitment process from abroad?
Yeah, so look, we do provide some great services for people abroad, people looking to move to Ireland, or for the diaspora looking to come home. So I think, like I mentioned before, that advice, I think, on the jobs market. So, you know, if you are looking at coming home, looking at like what, you know, cost of living and what sort of, you know, salaries companies are paying in a particular region or location, we can certainly support that. And we do provide a lot of advice on that for people, you know, and who's hiring and those types of trends. We help with interview tips and advice. So we'd be, if somebody is looking to come back, you know, we'd be helping them with tips on that and what a typical interview would involve. We actually have an annual insights report that we publish each year. It's actually coming out probably in the next, I think it's in the next month or so. So everyone keep an eye on that. But that's got some great trends from both employers and also candidates just on their view of the jobs market. And we have been running that report since, and it's based on a survey of usually over 2,000 people, just on trends in the market. Like, for example, I've just pulled out a stat there from last year's report that, you know, 57% of employers indicated they are looking beyond Ireland for talent. So just to give, you know, give an indication of what's happening in the jobs market here. And another stat that might be of interest just around remote working is that 42% of the current workforce are fully on site or in the office. So it's, I guess, indicating that there is that 57% that, you know, are in hybrid or remote roles as well. So, you know, it's just a good indication for people that are, you know, watching today. I guess other ways that we help, we offer temp jobs. So we do have temporary roles on offer as well, which is good for people when they do relocate, just to get the foot in the jobs market. And you know, we do help a lot of people in the medical and healthcare sectors moving over from abroad, and we help with compliance. We help with them kind of settling in and, you know, finding schools and you know, setting up PPS numbers as well, probably similar to the diaspora support program as well. And I guess lastly, like, we have been running targeted diaspora campaigns now for about 6 or 7 years. So we do have a free flights offer for any diaspora that we do place into employment. We do provide them with a free flight basically from anywhere in the world back to Ireland. So I think that's another great support there that we have. Also, we sponsor the GA Go service as well. So the GA Go service that streams the GA matches basically abroad. So we have some great campaigns running there as well, and some competitions. And I guess we promote the home truths of what it's like here now in Ireland as well. So that would be
brilliant, great.
A good summary there on that anyway.
Yeah, very comprehensive. And, you know, I never heard of anyone providing flights when you get a job. So that would have been.
Yeah, exactly.
For my first graduate job, God, donkeys years ago, I did my first interview on a phone call from Sydney, where I was working as a barman at the time. And I could have done with the flight home at some point.
Yeah.
But, and then I suppose just like in terms of one thing people might have in mind, you know, hearing from someone from running a recruitment business or being a leader in a recruitment business is, you know, going through the recruitment process abroad, like I mentioned, I did for all back in Ireland. Are there any tips that your recruiters might have, or things that people things that people should think about in advance before doing an interview or engaging the recruitment process from abroad for a job back home? Any tips that your recruiters might have you or thoughts?
Yeah, I think just around doing some research on the regions, and definitely I think research on the companies, that type of thing. It'd be fair, I'd say it'd be similar enough. Look, in terms of, you know, if you're applying for a job locally as well, but yeah, that would probably be the, you know, the main things there anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much. And I might move on to Paula now, but I'm sure we'll have some other. I forgot to say at the end we'll have some kind of open questions, hopefully from people attending as well. But open questions for everyone. But moving on to Paula now from Back for Business. So thanks for joining us, Paula. Can you tell us about Back for Business and the specific resources or programs you offer to facilitate networking or returning entrepreneurs? Oh, you're on mute there, I think.
I am indeed. Now you can hear me, I'm sure. So my entire focus is on entrepreneurship.
Yep.
So the Department of Foreign Affairs were looking to develop an initiative for returning or returned, you know, Irish immigrants who wanted to set up a business, who were at the early stage of setting up a business. And they asked if I could develop a program which would be tailored and focused on that particular group. And that's what we've done. Now, I'm going to talk to you separately about the networking element of it. Let me come back to that in a moment. But just to tell you about Back for Business itself. So an early stage entrepreneur, somebody who's come back and they're saying to themselves, now is my opportunity. I've left something. I've left a country where I was settled and, had a life. And I'm coming back to Ireland. It's like, as Ailbhe always says to me, it's like coming back to a new country. And this is my opportunity because I've had this idea in my head to set up a new business for many years. Now is my opportunity.
Yeah.
So what we do is we support those people who are at an early stage. So thinking about well-developed concept, thinking about an idea for a business, or those who've recently started. And by and large, the people would have had to be away for at least a year and home for 3 years or less. They would have had less than 2 years in sales. So it could be, just thinking about it, beginning to move it forward, or already started.
Right.
But it's that early stage, right? That's where we're looking at in the first place. Because the whole objective of what we do, and really what you're doing all together here, is to help people to integrate when they come home, right? So what we find is that very few people, and I would say to Erin, when you look at networks and the questions you were asking, we ask of those coming back who want to set a business. We say to them, what are the challenges in setting up a business in Ireland? And by far, the majority of them say, my professional and personal networks have gone soft. Now, that is unique to this particular demographic because I'm also involved in other initiatives to support early stage entrepreneurs, and they're focused on finance or people or whatever. This one, year on year on year, and as you said, Jack, we're doing this for 7 years. It is networks. That becomes the number one issue. So to tailor it for that group, what we do is we help them in the first instance to turn those who are accepted on the Back for Business support initiative to form a tribe among themselves. And what you find is the average that people are out of Ireland is 11 years, which I believe is the time you've been out of Ireland, Jack. So we'll have you back here yet. Okay.
I'm 3 months. Yeah.
3 months. Okay.
Yeah.
Look, what's 3 months between?
Rounding it. Yeah. 11 years.
Okay. So in fact, on our latest Back for Business 7, one of the guys was 35 years out of Ireland, right? So Ailbhe, 35 years will match up with your 25, I think, So people have been considerably out of Ireland for some time. And I'd like them to know that if they feel they've no network, well, neither has anybody else, because a lot of it is that you think as an entrepreneur that you're the only one doing it. You're the only one in the situation. And really, it can seem quite lonely. And what we endeavour to do is bring like-minded people together.
Yep.
So we're bringing early stage entrepreneurs together who have been abroad, and that's their commonality. They can be any sector, located anywhere in Ireland. And we find, in fact, that 75% are located outside Dublin.
Great.
So they can be coming back anywhere, starting any type of business and with different ambitions. Perhaps half of them are starting micro businesses, all expect to be employers, but maybe half expect to employ about, 5 or thereabouts. But there are another significant percent who expect to be employers of many people and within 3 years to have turnover of 1 million or more, right? So it's a variety of ambition among them.
Yeah.
And you were asking Erin, what can people from overseas who have experience overseas, what do they bring back? And one of the things that they bring back in terms of entrepreneurship is their network. So what you find is that 65% of those who are involved in Back for Business expect in 3 years to have export customers, right? Because they already have a base and an understanding of the culture and perhaps the language of another country. So that gives them a perfect link back to that country. right? So
Yeah.
that percentage would be higher than if you took a group of general early stage entrepreneurs, right? So 65%. The other thing I think that's worth saying is that if you've been away on average 11 years, and we're saying that your network is less strong than perhaps it would need to be, because when you're an entrepreneur, you do need to have connections. But one area that they're particularly, I would say, not informed about is the very strong support system, the ecosystem, if you like, for entrepreneurs in Ireland. It's really, really quite remarkable at this stage. And recognising the needs of this particular group, what we do is we organise a support day early on in the cycle, and we bring the development agencies together to brief them in person about what they have available. And we run mini workshops in the afternoon on tax, so you understand tax, legal, what are the legal foundations, what do I need to understand, how do I fund and finance the business. And, you know, I'm very pleased that the private sector, KPMG, Beecham's, will run those for us. But the development agencies, the local enterprise office that you refer to, Erin, Enterprise Ireland, Credit Review Office, Microfinance, they will all come in person. And really, it's very good. And the sign is that at the beginning of the cycle, less than 1 in 5 are a client of an agency. And at the end of the 6 months, more than 2 out of 3 are clients of agencies. So I think that's important and shows that we have been a support to help them reintegrate, to understand what other supports are there for them.
Brilliant. That's really good. Sarah mentioned at the start that I previously founded startups. So 2013, I founded one in Dublin. It was an app because that's what everyone was doing at the time. And then 2018, I launched a spin-off business from a consulting firm that was another software product. And what I found was, and they both failed, but I'm very, very proud that I've tried and failed. And it's something that I wish more Irish people would say that as well. The fear of failure is something that I think that can stop people getting to the start line. So something like one of the reasons why Digital Irish tries to support want to be founders as well as founders in London and New York. But in that journey, I found that being an entrepreneur is a lonely affair, and you commented on that. So it's great to hear that you have those supports. It can be a lonely and very high pressure job. But then, of course, like how would you in this support, is there ways that you sort of and people when they leave businesses, at least they have a team, maybe a boss, kind of like encourage them and motivate them and keep them accountable, or be accountable, how do you inject kind of that self-motivation, accountability into entrepreneurs, or is there some way you try and do that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the first point you mentioned there was this isolation. So let's get rid of that isolation first of all. And we put people round a table, right? So everything is round tables, and there's 8 or 9 early stage entrepreneurs. So all at the same stage of development, all have returned from overseas. And that round table is facilitated by what we call a lead entrepreneur. So a person who is not a consultant, a professional trainer, or an academic, but someone who has walked the walk. And in fact, if I look at our group of lead entrepreneurs, the majority of them are themselves returned Irish, and they have built strong businesses on the return.
Yep.
Now, with regard to the accountability, absolutely, I believe in that, because what we want to be able to demonstrate for the person themselves, besides demonstrating it for the initiative, is that by becoming involved in Back for Business, you can see progress. Over the 6 months, you can track progress. Now, in the first instance, if you don't set down your goals and milestones, you can think you're making progress, but how do you measure it? How do you know, right? So what we do at the first meeting is the lead entrepreneur will discuss with everyone, what is your goal? We know from your application form what your 3-year goal is in terms of your revenues, in terms of people employed, in terms of whether you want to become an exporter. Now, they might discuss those and whether they're too low or how to stretch them further, but let's accept. Then if you take the next 6 months, oh, that's 36 months. If we take the next 6 months, right? 6 months is nothing really, but if we take the next 6 months, that's going to start you on that journey towards your 36-month goals.
Yep.
So what are the goals and milestones that you need to hit over the next 6 months to get you well started on that journey? Okay, write them down. Write them down. Why? I'm very old-fashioned, you know, so if you're digital Irish there, I'm saying write it down in a notebook or somewhere. I don't care if it's on a computer or it's in a notebook you refer to all the time, but write it down and be accountable. And these are goals and milestones that aren't your partners, aren't your bank managers, your development agencies. These are yours. And, you know, one person, as I said, there's different ambition in this group. One person may have, you know, they're going to take on the world, and some person is taking on their local environment, right?
Yep.
Okay, let's tailor it so it's your goals and your milestones.
Great.
And when you declare those to the group, you have them written down, they're shared with the group, and every month you check in on your progress towards them. So what the group becomes is not only supportive in terms of peer support, but it also gives you good peer pressure.
Great.
Because if you're checking in every month, let's take an example. So supposing in your new business, you're saying, I want to have a website set up and I'm going to have that done by month 1, right? And I'm responsible for it. So month 1 comes, we're meeting again. Jack will say, who's my lead entrepreneur, will say, well, Paula, and how's the website going? Well, actually, it's not there yet, right? So the question may be, you know, what difficulties did you run into, right?
Sure.
Well, it could have been life intervened, but besides life intervening, it could be, I couldn't find a good content writer. I didn't know a good website designer, etc. And those around the table, not just the lead entrepreneur will say, can I make a suggestion? I've just put up a website and I use so-and-so. I have this content creator, and people will come with different suggestions for you. And then someone might say, and do you know, if you're trading online, that your Leo has grant support to help you develop that website.
Yep.
So you're getting good peer pressure with support around the group, and no one is seeking to cut anyone at the knees. It's
Lovely.
much more about nurturing and bringing you forward, so that what you find at the end of the 6 months is that people have achieved much more than they could have thought possible at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Because they're focused all the time, they're working on a month-to-month basis, and you find that the outcomes are very good. So in terms of, you know, feedback, 100% have found it positive. Over 90% are making positive decisions. And it's making incremental decisions that would bring you forward.
Yep.
So I think you have both.
Great. Yeah, Amazon AWS have a really interesting methodology called the working backwards methodology. That's how they create new products. So the Amazon Alexas, have one beside me here. And what they do is similar to your 36 months, what's your goal 36 months, and then work, you know, what do you need 6 months. So they actually do is they write the press release for the product. So they say, I don't work for them, but they draw a picture maybe, and they say this is the Amazon Alexa, and the press release is what they want the Guardian or the Irish Times to say about it. And then once they have that press release, then they say, okay, well, what do we need, like, 6 months before that, and then to enable that, the launch, the distribution. Well, what do we need for the distribution? And then obviously you get all the way back to how to make the thing in the first place. And they have that, the working backwards methodology is an approach that works very, very well. So similar to what you're saying there about the setting goals.
Well, I go from a different point of the working backwards, and I would talk about this quite a bit. And it's really, what does success look like? It's a similar thing. So I would say to a group, okay, so you're being interviewed by RTE or whoever you may wish in 3 years' time. Yep. What's your story? It's exactly the same idea, though I didn't hear theirs, but it's the same thing. And even, you know, I'm working with inspiring others to become entrepreneurs. I would ask them to say, you know, in terms of your own legacy, in terms of your life, what do you want success to look like?
Yeah.
Because it's very important, I think, to understand the why.
Yep.
Because when I decided I was going to focus entirely on entrepreneurship, I knew very clearly, as I do today, 25 years later, what the why is. I know the benefits that entrepreneurship brings, and that allows me still to be passionate and still to believe that we can make a difference.
Great, lovely. And then in terms of making a difference, you touched on a few stats earlier, but what are the tangible benefits? Are there any other high level stats you have, or qualitative points maybe, for people who've completed the program? Are there any tangible benefits that you might be able to share?
Absolutely. So what we do so we collect both the qualitative outcomes, as I said to you, in terms of, helping you to move you towards your ambition, making decisions, feeling more confident. All of those are well over 90%. Do you want to stay in touch? Would you recommend? Both of those are 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's good. And I would say it's sort of like jolly hockey sticks, it's happy faces. And that's terrific, because you want everyone to feel good about doing your program. But what I want to see is the impact. So I also like to look at very much, has this worked? Has it worked for you as an entrepreneur?
Yep.
So on the Back for Business program, for example, many of those who are on it initially aren't trading. So we would track in the first instance the number who start to trade over the course of the 6 months. And looking back at the last one, and 25% of those involved began to trade for the first time. Okay, now these are all small businesses in the first instance, but the overall turnover went from 630,000 to 1.7 million.
Wow.
Right, so very strong increase. We went from 32 people employed to 49 people employed, and we had 7 first-time exporters, right? And how we're getting those figures is we look at your application form, and at the end of the 6 months, we send you back that application form, okay? Because that also said what you wanted to get out of the program, right? Yourself. And you could say, well, is that, something to face, but no, because it informs them, it reminds them. And really they're saying, gosh, I didn't know I'd made all that. Is that where I was? Look where I am now.
Yeah.
And we asked them, okay, looking at where you were, looking at where you are now, tell us where you are now. So they're informed. So it's self-reporting, but informed by their original application form. And that's where we get our figures. And we can report on those after the 6 months. Right. And thanks to the Department of Foreign Affairs, we don't just have a 6-month cycle. They have now said to us, form a community. So, right. You could stay in touch with these participants who've been on the program. And we've introduced another roundtable, which we call further development. So if you want to stay on a roundtable and push your business faster forward, you could be on one of our further development roundtables.
Great, amazing. That's brilliant to hear. It sounds like a really great program. I might need it sometime soon in the future.
Well, listen, if you're coming back doing your own thing, Jack, please do get in touch. And I would say for those listening, maybe some of those are thinking about coming back and starting a business. But often what happens is someone listening knows someone who is, right? So I would say, could you please be our ambassador and tell others about it? Because we would love to help.
Sure. I'm starting a new job in 11 days, and it will have a bit of an Irish connection, so I can't get into it. But there's I might be knocking on your door. Just we have 1 minute left before we get on to Ailbhe, and one of the topics obviously today is networking, and we've heard some great stuff about how the entrepreneurial journey. But of course, networking then is the other side of the coin, I suppose, in business development. Would you have any? What would your tips be for anyone, entrepreneur or not, if they've moved home and don't know where to start?
Well, I thought that was a really interesting question, and I thought Erin made very good responses to it. And I was just thinking myself, I've built up very strong networks over the years. I'm not a wonderful person at standing around at events, really, But what I would always say is to give as much as you might look to take. So I always approach people and say, can I help? What can I do? And it's amazing what you can do, right? To bring people together and to help. You explained the New York vibe, which was very much how can we connect each other?
Yep.
And that works really, really well. I think the other thing is to be open to taking advice, and not think of that as a weakness. You know, I'm not, it's slightly gendered, but women, I think, are more open to looking for advice, right?
Sure. Yep.
The other thing I would say is about empathy. So if you go to an event and you're feeling a bit self-conscious, remember that there's other people there who are also feeling self-conscious. So approach someone who's standing by themselves, because they are only hoping that either the ground will open up and swallow them, or somebody will talk to them. So be that person. And by going forward, you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about that person who's standing by themselves, and you go forward with your hand and you introduce them. And I think that works very well. The thing I would say absolutely not to do is, when you're talking with someone, not to be looking over their shoulder to see, is there somebody more interesting, or who it is that you should be talking to.
Yeah.
And the final thing that we do in Back for Business and in the other initiatives, we have badges. And we have badges with our name, and it says the name of the company and Back for Business.
Yep.
And I always have one of those in my handbag. And if I go to any event, I wear it. And do you know something? People remember Paula. Why do they remember Paula? Because my name is there, right?
Sure.
And it allows them to know you and to remember you. And I have found that that actually works very well.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned talking about that person standing by themselves. Last night I was at an event in London, and there's a friend of mine called Jack, who is very good at, he grabs people who are walking by and he's like, hey, come here, talk to us, you know. And I've had some very interesting and serendipitous encounters because of that guy literally grabbing people. So yeah, I'm a big believer in the value in some serendipitous, spontaneous connection, and I think I've never gone to anything and thought that was a waste of time, really, because I find the value. So I love that point. Ailbhe, so last but not least of our three fantastic panelists, so your journey is you've moved abroad and back, and you spent quite a stint abroad as well. Can you tell us about what you've learned just with both moves?
Well, both moves, I think.
Sorry, also, could you explain IIBN? Could you just give us a
I'll just do a quick explanation about IIBN and then I'll go. So IIBN was set up in London in 2007 to connect Irish entrepreneurs to do business together. And then it launched in New York in 2008. And that's when I got involved. And then I'll tell you my story about all of that. And then it was in Dublin in 2010. It realistically was set up to connect Irish entrepreneurs to do business together globally. And it was always kind of looking for English people, Irish people in England to connect with people in New York, and for Dublin people to connect with people in London and in New York. But from my standpoint, I left Ireland when I was just after my leaving cert, and I moved to the UK and then the States. But I got involved in networking due to my business. I was actually in real estate. And I realized I was in the hospitality industry, then real estate, and realized I needed a network. And I was never moving back to Ireland. So I went to every network event in New York to see who could I find that was looking to buy, rent, or whatever with apartments. And in the middle of, I had a bit of a serendipity moment when I went to the launch of the IIBN event. I realized I don't have a network if I ever moved home. So IIBN was really set up to go people going outwards. And I was probably the first person that turned around and said, wait, this is actually for people going inward if you're returning back home. And I think the one thing is that you have to remember is that you find a network that works for you. Yeah. So I realistically went to the IIBN events in New York, got involved very early on, became one of the founding members, ran most of the events, made most of my trips home to London and Dublin around events so that I would actually have a network, still never moving home. But I do think you have to find I think realistically, when you are moving home, move home when you're ready, not because you think you want to come home. Because as Paula said, I always say we're emigrating back to a country that we know, but we don't know. And people around you actually think you know it. And you're like, oh, no, I don't. But you're also coming back with a wealth of knowledge that you want to share, not necessarily go into the roles of the jobs you've been in before, because you're looking to your lifestyle is changing, and that's why you're coming back. But networking is really important. But so it's also test all the networks out, find out what works for you best, because I think it's not necessarily, and I know if you're down the country, you're like, oh, what networks can I go to? There's a lot of local networks that are there, and people are really willing to, and you will meet like-minded people who have returned home and are looking for that network. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I mean, as well, you don't need to rely on an existing network. I mean, if you're living in, I don't know, my husband's in Oughterard. I don't know if there's an innovators community in Oughterard, Connemara, but you know, you can put a message out into an existing channel saying, I'm interested in this, in startups, in medical device technology, whatever it might be, and start it as well. So, but yeah, I agree on the testing the networks thing. When I went to New York, I landed, and a very good friend of mine, Tomas, who still lives there from Inishmore, told me about the list of networks that were there, including IBM. I remember I went to a very Ronan Dunn, who used to be the CEO of Verizon Consumer. Went to a brilliant talk by him, an IBM one, and then I landed on Digital Irish because it was all about the impact and innovation, and that was the common thread in the content. Is people more like myself doing my job there. So that's how I ended up eventually joining the board there in New York. But yeah, testing the networks and seeing which ones, you know, stimulate you and inspire you, I suppose, or have that professional value is great.
And Jack, also I would suggest to people, ask, if you are coming back, ask people who have returned, because there's a lot of us who returned, and we're all of different ages, generation, looking for different things. I think ask your network who have come back.
Yeah.
What network would you suggest to get involved? And I think also if you're going to a network event, whoever sent that invitation, walk in that door and find that person, and and have that name badge. And I would sort of say Paula might not go to networks, but Paula knows everybody that needs to be known. So don't.
Sure.
That's why I would say that you go and find out who sent that email, and they will introduce you and say, I'm looking, because people go to networks because everybody's there to do something, want to meet people and do business together.
Yeah. It's funny you're talking about, you know, moving abroad and back, because I've done the same. And on the way over to New York, for anyone who's seen Brooklyn, the film with Saoirse Ronan, she's moving over and she's a little lost lamb and she's green behind the ears and she doesn't know what's going on. And on the way back, she's giving advice to someone. So I would have considered myself moving to New York, being Saoirse on the way over. And I'm now, when I move back in these days, I'm Saoirse on the way back going like, go here, go there, you know? Yeah, you do, it isn't until you move back maybe that you realize the value and what you know and what you can advise other people on as well. And again, paying it forward, that's how, you know, authentic connections are built. And then what would you say, like, are the key challenges that people face on, like, having done it yourself, upon moving back to Ireland to rebuild their networks? What would you say the key challenges are?
I think it is trying to find those like-minded people. And I think it's funny, you go out to a network event and you meet people and they sort of say, oh, I've only moved back, I'm back 3 years. I still find it very hard. And then you sort of say, oh, I did it too. And I think now I'm actually in recruitment, so it's quite interesting to see people looking for jobs and realize that when they're looking for jobs, sometimes companies don't actually know the companies they worked for, and it's trying to realize you're bringing back that wealth of knowledge to people. But I think it is finding people that have moved back and learn from them. And also, as Erin would say, go to local events locally, even if you're outside Dublin, go to anything you can just to figure it out. And I think if people have got kids and stuff like that, when kids get into school, it's easier for them to build that network out. I think when you're in it, and it's also realized that Irish people are nosy, even though Erin said to us earlier, people in the country don't ask what you do. We all want to know where somebody came from, what they did when they were away, and what are they looking to do now. So don't be afraid to ask anybody anything.
Yeah, great. How would you say IIBN is set up as a facilitator of that? So someone who knows they're moving home, how is IIBN set up to try and help? Not, you know, it's a non-profit, so you're not a service, but, you know, as a facilitator or a channel or forum to help people who are moving home.
I think I probably am that person, because I was the one that did it, and it was only when I came back to Dublin at one of the events I realised that I'm actually looking at it the other way, where everybody was looking at going to connections the other way, out to the States and out to the UK. And I think we've actually seen a lot of people move back from the UK who would have heard about IIBN and had come to events and then went, okay, I know somebody there. This is a way of breaking it in. But it is look, I would sort of say I'm the advocate of that. I'm the advocate of bringing the network back inwards instead of outwards.
Yeah. Okay. And does IBN support people like professionally? Does it support collaboration between members, or is it the events, or is there a kind of online community as well?
Yeah, we do collaborate, but what we would be a bit like Digital Ireland. Like, look, I know the guys in Digital Ireland, and they're two very different efforts, but still trying to do the same thing. But we
Yeah.
would have a lot of collaboration. I think it's a lot of people would be sort of say, I'm looking for a connection, how to do funding, who can give me advice. Our sponsors would also do some programs, like Beechams would do some programs, or BK would actually run some programs in reference accountancy and stuff like that. And there is online and offline. We used to run a couple of programs, which was Young Leaders, which was in London. We never really took off in Dublin, and then also we did Leap in New York, which was to help women entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But it's all about trying to connect people if they want to do business together or just get advice.
Okay, right. Great. I remember Leap and the Young Leaders actually, so definitely you obviously had an impact there if I remember them from a few years ago. What would you say your top tips are for how to be successful in building a network?
Be yourself. Don't go in with a sales pitch to a network, because I think that's the worst thing you can do. And I think, as Paula said, if you see somebody on your own, because you have to remember you're on your own. And we all hate networking. None of us actually love it. We all walk into that. We all go to network sometimes if we don't know nobody. Look for that person on their own. Grab them. Have a conversation. And as Paula very nicely said, don't be looking to see somebody better. Yes, we can end up with somebody we don't want to talk to, but all you need to do is do what your friend Jack does. As somebody else is passing by, pull that person into the conversation.
Sure.
So that they can so you can continue the conversation, and then you can move on when it's appropriate. But I do think don't be afraid to go in on your own and go to that person.
Yeah.
On their own.
That's a really good tip. Yeah, I love it. And
the other thing is, look at the name badges. Look as you're walking in the door. You might know somebody that you went to school or in college with that you might not even realize in that room.
That's very true. Yeah. Great. Love it. And then if, like, for someone who's a bit more introverted potentially, or has those more introvert tendencies to be more introverted, what advice would you give them? Because something we did mention that was covered earlier was, that person by themselves. And obviously someone who's more introverted, going there is a leap. But what would you recommend or suggest to people with introverted tendencies that you might have seen coming to the IABN events?
It's funny, when I actually was in New York, I would have run the events, and I actually stood at the name badge table, so I would actually know everybody.
Yeah.
And I actually told all the board, my fellow board members, one of you at each event need to stand at the table and bring somebody in to meet people, because I don't think people realize, if the organizers know the names, the next time they come, you know who else you can introduce them to. And I do think it's really important for people who are organizing, or when you're walking into an event and you say, whoever's at the name badge table, say, sorry, this is my first event. Is there somebody you can introduce to me who's part of the organization? And anybody that's involved in the organization is willing to do that. But it is very important to have somebody to bring somebody in and say, meet somebody. And I think networking in Dublin, in Ireland, has become a very new thing. And Jack, as you said, in New York, everybody's willing to introduce everybody to everybody. And then when you move to London, it's a bit like going, oh, stop, just because you've been in New York, don't be coming in here networking with everybody. Calm it down. And then in Ireland, it's a bit of both. So it is that whole thing of making sure that people, just going back to how you felt when you went to a network event. How did you feel when you went to the first network event on your own? What would you like for somebody else to do? But grab that person at the name badge and to ask them to introduce it to somebody.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I think the way I kind of conduct myself whenever I go to things like last night or this evening, is I'll have kind of if it's a professional event, there's a little bit of professional, but I'm very, actually probably earlier than most, move on to just personal and just being like, half because it's more interesting to have the crack, but I think it's also how you build a rapport with someone. You have a personal connection rather than just knowing that this is the work they do. So it's something that I often do, and I think it's part of that. Anyone that I would have a strong rapport with professionally comes, I think, from moving on from the work stuff to the personal stuff. It's kind of the opposite we were talking about earlier, I think, with
but I actually think you should start with the personal stuff first. It should be like, I think, especially when you're away, the first question you'll ask somebody is where you're from. Where I think in Ireland you sort of have to think about a different question, like it'll probably be the weather or something, because at the end of the day you will find out about what they do for a living. So I think it is the personal stuff you ask her.
Yeah, I think actually if you're from living in New York, what everyone talks about is the visa. So which is like, what's the visa? What are you on? There's always horror stories. And then in London, people always talk about
How long it took you to get there.
yeah, the commute and like the tube and like, oh, what nightmare did you have? And of course they're all on strike because of, we won't get into politics, but there's always a common thread, and I think if you can kind of, if someone's come back from Abu Dhabi, like, what's their rant? What's their scar war story? That is just the common. What's the weather like version? You know, that's the starting conversation in Ireland. But what's the Abu Dhabi or the Spanish conversation opener? You know, that'd be an interesting one to maybe learn and do a bingo checklist as you meet people from around the world who've returned. That's really brilliant. Thank you, Ailbhe, for sharing your thoughts and also a little bit more on IABN. And I suppose it kind of like rounds up the individual questions for everybody. I think the one question which was it's not a final question, but certainly an open question to all of you was, we love to hear a motivating story. Like Ireland, we're a nation of storytellers. So is do any of you have a story of anyone maybe that anonymity allowed, but who might be a bit of an inspiration, and someone who's moved back, built a network, maybe built a business? Anyone have any motivational story for the attendees? Paula?
Yes, if I may. I mean, the thing about Back for Business, there's loads of stories of people who've come back and done different things. Some of the people are very much looking to do what they've done previously, and some people are going quite a different route. So I don't need anonymity at all. If you take Ailbhe Matthews, for example, we first came on Ailbhe Matthews in Back for Business when she was in Madrid, and she was an investment banker, and she wanted to set up a different business, come back to Ireland and set up a different business. And she has since, with two other co-founders, set up Sisterly, which is a female supplement. And I see you nodding, Ailbhe. I mean, they really are developing a high profile around this. And she also qualified nutrition to allow herself to do it. But there was a dream. She was working as an investment banker in Madrid with a dream to, one, come back to Ireland, and two, set up a business in a totally different sphere. And I think what's important about allowing them to, helping them to integrate back is that Ailbhe is now on Starting Strong, which is another initiative for ambitious female entrepreneurs. So that will move her forward and allow her to grow, because they want to grow a global business.
Right.
And if I can just make one comment, if I may, which is in a way associated, and it's to do with, I see questions coming in on forming networks and how might one do it. One of the things that's very high in our priorities as part of the culture for Back for Business is, when you're on a round table, we say confidentiality, collaboration, but also respect. And respect recognizes that some people are talkers and some people are not. And the lead entrepreneur will seek to draw out the person who doesn't naturally come forward with their views, so that there's no dominating voice. And what you find over time is that the quiet person, by refining their business and their business plan, gains in confidence, and then can walk in to the networking or where else, and has the confidence that they've honed in a smaller group.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Sarah, you popped up on our screen.
As if by magic. I just wanted to say this has been a fantastic conversation. You've each brought something different to it, and I think it's really made it a very rich discussion. Jack, you've done an incredible job moderating. We do have time for a few questions from the audience, and we have received one, so I might just pose it to all of you, to whoever wants to jump in. And the question is, how has the landscape of professional networking in Ireland changed in recent years, or indeed in the time that you've been away?
I'll start with that. I think realistically, if I look back when I left Ireland, there was probably very little networks. There was probably the Meals on Wheels and the what was the other one, Paul? I can't remember what the other ones, but there was very, very few networks. I think
ICA, maybe.
The ICA, thank you, Paula. And networking was kind of not looked to the word people would talk about. I think in the last, I'd say COVID, actually, there was networks that started, because look at IABN, Digital Ireland, a lot of networks had started before COVID, but I actually think during COVID, people really grabbed onto networking online and stuff like that. And I think now you've got a lot of women in networks all around Ireland. They're in every county. You've got, and then there's a local enterprise. I think people have realized that people need to lean on different networks. So it has really changed. And I think the chambers are great. There's a lot of chambers in every place. So I think and then there's other places now. You've got the different the hub spots to work in, the co-working space around the country. I think people have realized that networking and connecting has become a bigger thing. And I'd say it's probably started before COVID, but really became a bigger thing since COVID. And now people have realized we need to get back out again, meeting people in person.
I think, yeah, building on that, the one huge change I think in the last years is the idea of co-working spaces. I don't know when it started, but I think back to when I was, starting my professional career, you wouldn't really hear of co-working spaces, and then WeWork started popping up, boom and bust. But other co-working spaces and collaborative places where like-minded people come together, and it kind of fosters the ability to network and have professional conversations like that. So yeah, I think co-working, not speaking of Ireland just individually, but certainly a huge trend around the world.
Absolutely. Paula, Erin, if you want to jump in, feel free. But I will just say that I think just even in terms of the landscape of return has changed in the last number of years. And certainly there's definitely a feeling of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and the wave of those returning now who've really been prompted to come home because of the pandemic and the distance from family. It's a different type of return that's happening now. And it's very interesting to watch that evolve. And it's great that there is so much more in terms of networks that people can plug into, but indeed also resources when it comes to planning that move back. I mean, there's fantastic practical information on citizensinformation.ie. You've got ourselves, Cross-Care Irish Diaspora Support Project, and we can signpost on to places like Back for Business, FRS, IIBN, and increasingly Digital Irish, Safe Home Ireland. So there are all these things that exist now that, say, even 10, 12 years ago wasn't the case, which I think is really brilliant. So unless anyone on the panel has one last word to say.
Sarah, what I would say, one thing is, a friend of mine said to me when I moved back, and he actually said, congratulations moving back. He said, it's very easy to leave, but it's very hard to move back. So remember, when you come back, you've done a bigger step than you did when you left, and pat yourself on the back and sort of say, you've moved, you knew what it was like to set up a network in another country. You can definitely come back and do it very much the same as you did, but congratulations on coming back, because I think it's a bigger deal.
That's a fantastic point to leave this panel on, Ailbhe. Thank you for making it, and it is so important, and for people to remember that that move back sometimes can feel harder, even though it is coming home, and it is moving to another country. It is emigration, albeit of a different kind. So many thanks to all of you for attending today's event, and please join me in thanking our wonderful panel. Our moderator Jack did an excellent job. Our speakers Ailbhe, Erin, and Paula, they've all shared invaluable insights. They've answered your questions, and they've given us such food for thought. I would like to acknowledge the support of the Government of Ireland's Immigrant Support Programme for making this conference possible. And for anyone with further questions, or if you'd like to discuss your own personal circumstances of return, I would encourage you to get in touch with us at diasporasupport.ie. Likewise, if you have any feedback you'd like to share about our events across this week, we will be emailing you a short feedback form, so do fill that out. And recordings of all the webinars from this week will be available shortly at diasporasupport.ie, as well as our YouTube channel. I do hope that you will continue this conversation online using the hashtag Abhaile 2024, and make sure that you look at diasporasupport.ie for links and more information on returning home. As part of Abhaile 2024, we really sought to bring together members of the Irish diaspora from across the globe to contemplate contemporary return migration. And this conference has been dedicated to addressing challenges and opportunities for those considering return. It's been filled with insightful sessions, engaging discussions, and practical resources on all things returning to Ireland. And I will just say, as no Irish gathering is complete without paying homage to our fantastic, rich cultural tradition, I'm delighted to share that we'll be closing the conference with a moving spoken word piece by the very talented Carl Byrne that's entitled Returning Home, and we'll be sharing this across our social channels later today. Finally, in closing, I'd really like to thank all my team at Cross-Care Irish Diaspora Support Project, Lucia on the communication side of things, Niall as moderator yesterday, and of course Damien, who's been speaking to people who are planning their return as part of our clinics. Their efforts have really made Abhaile 2024 the success that it is. So thank you very much, everyone. And with that, I wish you Slán Abhaile.